My wealthy family pretended to be poor, the million-dollar secret they kept from me. The first time I truly understood the weight of money, or the lack of it, I was 8 years old, standing in the cereal aisle of our local grocery store. My mother held a crumpled coupon in one hand and studied the prices with the intensity of a chess master planning her next move. Mom, can we get the chocolate ones? I asked, pointing to the colorful box that seemed to glow under the fluorescent lights. Not today, sweetie. These are better for you, she said, placing the generic brand in our cart with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. That moment crystallized something in my young mind. We were the family who couldn't afford chocolate cereal. We were the ones who shopped with coupons, who wore secondhand clothes, who took staycations instead of real vacations. And for 23 years, I believed that narrative completely. The revelation came on an ordinary Tuesday in March, triggered by something as mundane as a water heater failure in my studio apartment. I called my father, as I always did when something broke beyond my meager repair skills. Dad, my water heater died. The landlord says it'll take a week to replace. Could I maybe borrow some money for a hotel? I'll pay you back when. Just come stay with us, he interrupted, his voice carrying that familiar tone of gentle resignation I'd heard whenever money came up. Your old room is still there. So I packed a bag and drove to the modest two-bedroom house where I'd grown up, the same house with the peeling paint and the kitchen faucet that had dripped for as long as I could remember. Mom greeted me at the door with a hug that smelled like vanilla and worry. I'm sorry you have to deal with this, honey, she said. I know money's tight for you right now. I laughed bitterly. Money's always been tight, Mom, for all of us. Something flickered across her face, so quickly I almost missed it. But I'd inherited her chess player's instincts, and that flicker felt significant. That night, unable to sleep in my childhood bed, I wandered downstairs for water. The house was dark, except for a sliver of light under my father's study door. I heard voices, my parents talking in those hushed tones reserved for serious conversations. Can't keep doing this to her, Margaret. She's struggling, working 2 jobs, and we're sitting on. We agreed, David, until she's 25. That was the plan. But look at her. She thinks she's a failure because she can't afford basic necessities. She's our daughter, for God's sake. I pressed closer to the door, my heart hammering. 25? What happened when I turned 25? The money has to mean something, David. If we just hand it to her, she'll never understand its real value. Look how hard she works, how kind she is, how she never takes anything for granted. That's because she learned to earn everything. Money? What money? I stood there in the hallway, pieces of my life suddenly shifting like puzzle pieces finding their correct positions. The way my parents never seemed genuinely stressed about bills, despite their constant talk of being careful with money. How we always had food, always had a roof, always had what we needed, just never what we wanted. The way my father's old car somehow never broke down despite being supposedly on its last legs for years. The next morning, I confronted them over coffee and the generic cereal of my childhood. I heard you talking last night, I said simply. My parents exchanged that look, the one married couple's perfect after decades together. My mother's coffee cup trembled slightly as she set it down. What did you hear, sweetie? She asked, but her voice already carried the weight of someone preparing for confession. Enough to know that our family's poverty was apparently a performance. What happens when I turn 25, Mom? My father ran his hands through his graying hair, a gesture I'd inherited. Sarah, sit down. Please. I am sitting down. There's a trust fund, he said quietly. Your grandmother, my mother, left it for you. She died when you were 2, so you don't remember her. The trust turned 25. The number, when he said it, seemed to echo in the small kitchen. $3.7 million. I stared at them. These people who had raised me to believe that wanting chocolate cereal was a luxury we couldn't afford. 3.7 million, I repeated slowly. And you let me work at a gas station in high school to save money for college. Yes, my mother said, tears starting to flow. Because your grandmother was very specific in her instructions. She grew up wealthy, Sarah, spoiled and entitled and disconnected from the real world. She said it ruined her capacity for genuine happiness. She wanted you to understand the value of work, of earning things, of appreciating what you have. So you pretended to be poor. We live modestly, my father corrected gently. There's a difference. We're not poor, but we're not wealthy either. Your grandmother's money, that's separate. That's yours. But only after you've learned to be a person first, not just someone with money. I thought about my childhood, about the shame I'd felt when classmates talked about their family vacations while we visited free museums, about working through college, about the pride I'd felt graduating debt-free through scholarships and part-time jobs, about the tiny apartment I was so proud of, even with its dying water heater. You could have helped me, I said, but even as I said it, I wasn't sure I meant it. We could have, my mother agreed. But look at who you became instead. You tip generously even when you're broke. You volunteer at the animal shelter despite working 60 hours a week. You chose social work over law school because you wanted to help people, not because you needed to make money. Would you have made those choices if you'd known about the trust fund? The question hung in the air like incense, heavy and complex. I thought about my coworkers, about the trust fund kids I'd met in college who seemed to drift through life without ever truly touching ground. I thought about the satisfaction I felt when I'd saved enough to buy my first car, beat up and beautiful in its independence. I'm angry, I said finally, but I'm also, I don't know, confused? Because I think I understand why you did it. Your grandmother's letter, my father said, she wrote it specifically for you to read when you turned 25. It's upstairs, in the safe. She explains everything better than we ever could. There's a safe upstairs? In this house? My parents laughed, the first genuine laughter of the morning. Behind the family photo in our bedroom, Mom said. Your grandmother also left you her jewelry, some investment properties, and a house in Vermont. She wanted you to have choices, Sarah, but only after you knew who you were without money defining you. I sat there, processing the magnitude of the deception and the love that had motivated it. My entire identity had been built on the foundation of financial struggle, on the pride of self-reliance, on the deep satisfaction of earning every small comfort. I need some air, I said, standing up. I walked to the park where I'd played as a child, the same park where I'd learned to be content with simple pleasures, swings and slides instead of expensive toys, picnics instead of restaurants. The irony wasn't lost on me that my family's fake poverty had given me something my grandmother's real wealth apparently couldn't: the ability to find joy in small things. When I returned home, I found my parents sitting together on the couch, looking like defendants waiting for a verdict. I want to read the letter, I said. My grandmother's handwriting was elegant, old-fashioned. Her words were both an apology and an explanation. A love letter to a granddaughter she'd never really known but somehow understood perfectly. My dear Sarah, it began, if you're reading this, you've discovered the elaborate deception your parents and I orchestrated. You have every right to be angry. But I hope in time you'll understand that we gave you something more valuable than money. We gave you yourself. She wrote about watching wealth corrupt her own generation, about seeing money become a substitute for character, achievement, and genuine human connection. She wrote about her hope that I would learn to value people over possessions, experiences over objects, character over status. The money is yours now, my darling girl, but more importantly, you know who you are without it. You've learned that your worth isn't measured in dollars, that happiness comes from purpose and connection, not from what you can buy. Use the money wisely, but never let it use you. The letter ended with a challenge. Live generously, love deeply, and remember that the best inheritance I could give you wasn't money. It was the chance to discover that you never needed it to be whole. I folded the letter carefully and looked at my parents, these imperfect people who had loved me enough to let me struggle, to let me fail, to let me find my own strength. I'm still angry, I said, but I also understand, and I'm grateful. What will you do now? My father asked. With the money? I thought about it, about the weight of sudden wealth and the responsibility it carried. I think I'll keep working, I said slowly. Keep living simply. Maybe use some of it to help other people the way I've been helped, quietly, carefully, in ways that teach, rather than just give. My mother cried then, and I understood that they had been holding their breath for 23 years, waiting to see who I would become, hoping their gamble would pay off. The water heater in my apartment was fixed the next week, and I moved back to my small space. But everything was different now. Not because I was wealthy, but because I understood that my parents' gift hadn't been money. It had been the chance to build a life based on my own values, my own choices, my own understanding of what mattered. I kept working at the social services agency. I kept living in my small apartment. But I also started a foundation, anonymously, quietly, that helped working families pay for things like car repairs and medical bills, the kind of unexpected expenses that I now knew my family had never really worried about. The trust fund sits mostly untouched, growing and waiting. Someday, I might buy a house, might travel, might do the things that money makes possible. But I'll do them as Sarah, the Sarah who was raised to believe that chocolate cereal was a luxury, who learned that love sometimes looks like letting someone struggle, who discovered that the most valuable things in life can't be bought at any price. My grandmother was right about one thing. The best inheritance wasn't the money. It was the chance to learn that I never needed it to be complete. And perhaps that's the most valuable gift any family can give. Not wealth, but the wisdom to live well with or without it. The $1 million secret my family kept wasn't just about money. It was about values, about character, about the kind of person they hoped I would become. And looking back now, I can see that their deception was actually the most honest thing they ever did for me. Because in pretending to be poor, they made me rich in all the ways that truly matter.